What? I mean, apparently he doesn't even know where it is nowadays. I was listening to him talk on, I think it was one of the boxing podcasts.
72.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the weekly Dartscast in association with Darts Corner. I'm Alex Moss and delighted to be joined as always by my co-host, Darts statistician Burton DeWitt. We're recording this week's show on a Saturday as we've got the World Grand Prix just around the corner. So how are you doing and how's your weekend been so far?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out if we've ever recorded on a Saturday before. I know we've recorded on a Sunday a few times, but Saturday, it's been a while. But yeah, going well. Got up early to watch the Australian football grand final on delay because I wasn't going to watch it at 2 a.m. So ready, even though it's 10 on a Saturday morning, it feels like it's already mid-afternoon for me. How are you, Alex?
Good to hear. Yeah, I'm doing all right. Thank you. We had our darts competition last night, Friday night, another run to the last 16 for me, which sounds good on paper, but I had a bye in the last 32 and then lost. So I definitely need to get on the practice board, which is, I'm sure, where a lot of the top players are going to be this weekend ahead of the World Grand Prix, which starts on Monday. The double out event returns in Leicester next week. It's one of the longest running major events on the PDC calendar. Michael van Gerwen, the defending champion, the favourite with the bookmakers, but we've got to talk about another contender in Dave Chisnall, who's won 2 titles in the last 7 days, winning the Hungarian Darts Trophy on Sunday, another Euro Tour title, his third of the year, and then picking up a Players' Championship title in Barnsley during this week. So the question is this now Chizzy's time to win that elusive first major title?
Well, I mean, if we're going back just a couple months ago, I said it was his time at the World Match Play. And I do think he's as close as he's ever been. Okay, he's not made a bunch of finals in majors like he did 7-8 years ago when he was making a couple each year and not getting over the line. And I shouldn't just in majors, also a couple World Series events. But overall, he's never won titles in clumps like these. He's won in the past 12 months 4 European Tour titles. He won back-to-back titles since he skipped the first of the Players' Championship events. He didn't play in it. So consecutive events he played between Hungary and the second Players' Championship event this past week on Thursday. He won 12 matches to win both titles. That's just phenomenal. That's almost as phenomenal as Barry Vampire just winning the WDF singles as we record right now on double 16. I think it's the first time we've had if that counts as a major winning dart while we record. So congrats to Barry Vampire. But back to Dave Chisnall. He's never won titles in clumps like these. And he's done it in just many different ways. I mean, the final on Sunday against Luke Humphries was, they were saying during the match, the greatest Euro Tour or the second greatest Euro Tour final ever. That might be an exaggeration, but not by much. It is certainly up there among the greatest matches ever on the Euro Tour stage. Back and forth all the way. Chizzy's near 105 average was almost not enough. And Luke Humphries hitting that 9-darter to go 7-5 ahead and putting the pressure on Chizzy to hold, break, hold, to win. But Chizzy actually played probably his 3 worst legs of the match in those last 3 legs to come back and win that match. It was just that Luke Humphries went completely off the boil after that 9-darter. Over those next 3 legs after 12, he left 96. That's not too bad in the first leg, but when you're throwing second, that's not usually going to be good enough against someone averaging over 105. But then in the last 2 legs, 201 left after 12 and 141 left after 12. Chizzy just didn't have the pressure on him and coasted through that. Now, granted, that 141 left after 12 was nearly taken out by Luke Humphries, missing just narrowly double 12 for his second 141 of the night and for the title. But Chizzy was able to get through playing his 3 worst legs of the match. But beyond that, what can you say? It was a brilliant weekend, beating Michael van Gerwen in the quarterfinals, holding off Scott Williams, who had everything to play for, trying to get to the World Grand Prix in that semifinal, and then coming back, since it was the second semifinals, on short notice and beating Luke Humphries was just impressive. But he to then follow it up with another title in the Players' Championship event just a couple days later. Chizzy's playing at such a consistent level right now that we've just never seen before, and he's a force every single tournament. But there's other people as well, and some of them will come on to later. Probably the best player in the world right now, and by right now I mean over the last week, is Gary Anderson.
In his last 24 matches in Players' Championship events, going back to the Players' Championship events at the beginning of the season, 20 of those 24 have been 99 or above. And by the way, 99 is now his season average. Actually, 99 and a third is his season average in the Players' Championships. Best of anyone who's played more than one match this year. And he's was only one of only two players to win his board all 3 days this past week, the other being Christian Kist. There's a lot of players who we haven't even been talking about, like Gary Anderson, who are playing as well, if not better than Chizzy. It is Chizzy's time if Chizzy has a time. And I picked him in Blackpool because I think he has a major in him. But it's going to be tough. And even in this event, it's going to be tough right off the bat. Luke Woodhouse, who got in at that last spot, plays in the first round. And then if he gets through that, very likely a rematch against Luke Humphreys. Chizzy is one of the form players, and it might be the most confident player coming in here. But doing it on a major stage is another question. Is it his time? I hope so. I picked him a couple months ago, but I've been wrong before, and I'm not gonna risk being wrong again. Oh, screw it. I'll risk being wrong again. Yes, it's Chizzy's time.
Yeah, it very well could be. And you mentioned it. You backed Chizzy to win the match player a few months ago, and I don't think you've been alone there in predicting Dave Chisnall to win these events. There's been a lot of pundits, a lot of fans who have predicted Chizzy to win major titles, and he has been close on many occasions before. You go back to his early days, if you like, at Lakeside 2010 in the BDO, getting to the final there. And then since jumping over to the PDC, he's got to 6 more major finals. And I think this event in particular coming up now, the World Grand Prix, is the one where he's had a lot of those deep runs. He's got to 2 finals, 2013, 2019. And for me, I think 2020 was his best chance to win the World Grand Prix, win the title that year. Lost out 4-3 to go in Price in the semi-finals, and he had match darts to win that game. And if he had won that game, he would have played at the time a player in Dirk van Dijvenbode, who was the surprise package in that tournament. He wasn't the player that he is now, a well-established top 16 player. He was coming through the ranks at that time, so he would have gone into that final as a big favourite. And going back to that tournament, he averaged 102 in the first round. There was a 90-plus average as well that week, and in a double-in, double-out format, those are impressive numbers. So we know that this is a tournament that Dave Chisnall can perform well in, and he's got to go to Leicester next week feeling confident about his game. He's won 3 titles on the Euro Tour this year. He's just picked up that title on the floor this week as well. And you mentioned some of the results that he had at the weekend on the Euro Tour, and the game against Luke Humphreys, I'll give it a mention as well, because it is one of the best finals that we've seen on the Euro Tour, going all the way to a decider. Chizzy a 104 average and defying a 9 darter and a 170 finish from Luke to win that game from 7-5 down to win it. So he's capable of winning titles on the floor on the Euro Tour. The next step is to win one of those major titles, and he goes in, I think he's around 16-1 with the bookmakers to win it. And he is a genuine live contender, I think, for this tournament. And it is hard to say, is this his time now? Because we have felt it before, haven't we, at various times over the years, that he is on the cusp of winning one of these titles, and it can come down to those fine margins. We spoke about some of the players that are performing well at the moment. It can come down to just one dart in hand at a double when your opponent's waiting on a double to win the leg. Those are the moments that you've got to be clinical. And Chizzy, his resume speaks for itself. I think he's got over 20 titles now in the PDC. Not many players have been able to do that, but the one that he's looking to win is one of these major titles. And I think you look at the list of players that are going to be involved next week, the 32 players, few of them are going to come in with as much confidence or feeling as good about their game as Dave Chisnall at the moment. He's got a lot of belief and confidence behind him. And yeah, I think we'll see. Is this going to be his time next week? I think it's difficult to say. I think he is going to be in the running going into the weekend. I think when you come down to the quarterfinals on Friday next week, I think he will still be in the tournament, and then it's about putting it together for that weekend. So yeah, I'm not going to back him to win the World Grand Prix, but I do expect him to have a say and be a contender, and I do expect to see him involved in the quarterfinals next week.
Well, we'll get to the quarterfinals in about 4 or 5 days, but first we have to get through, the very first round. 16 ties. They were announced on Monday after the field was finalized. Any of those first round ties, though, jump out to you?
Yeah, there's definitely a few that spring to mind when I looked at the draw, and we get this every year with the World Grand Prix because only the top 8 players are seeded. You can get in the first round 2 top 16 players going up against each other, and we've got a few here. Gerwyn Price against Danny Noppert, who was another title winner this week. Damon Heta against Ryan Searle. But looking outside of those 2 games, there's 2 that I've got down here that I'm really looking forward to, and the first of them, Nathan Aspinall against Stephen Bunting. You've got on one side, Nathan Aspinall, he won the last major event on Sky, the World Match Play. This is the next week-long major event that we've got on the calendar, and got to the final of this event last year, almost produced that incredible comeback against Michael van Gerwen. What was he, 4-0 down, got it back to, I think, 4-3 before losing 5-3 in the end. But I think he's got his hands full here with Stephen Bunting, because we spoke about him, I think it was on last week's show or the week before, got to that Euro Tour final. We mentioned the change of darts. He's gone from 12 grams to 18 grams, and he got to the final, had a bit of luck on the way there, but fair to say that the performances that he put in this week on the floor in those Pro Tour events, it wasn't just the odd game. It was a serious long spell of top performances. On the Wednesday, there was a 106, 109, 111 averages, and then he lost with a 106 average to Christian Kist, who he deserves a shout out. You mentioned him as well, but getting to a final, almost adding his name to that short list of players to win a Players' Championship without a tour card, but he's in a provisional spot now for Ali Pali. Good to see him playing well again. But back to Stephen Bunting. Again, he's had some big averages for the rest of the week. He had a couple more 100-plus averages on the Thursday, 3 more on the Friday. And for me, I think he's showing some of the best form that he's ever been in. So it's a shame that one is a first-round game, because best of 3 sets is a very short format. You would like to see that game maybe played over a longer format. But the other one for me that stands out is Michael van Gerwen against Josh Rock. And we all remember their first meeting in a major event last year, the Grand Slam, that last 16 game, 10-8 to Michael van Gerwen. Josh Rock having that 9-darter in the second leg, and the celebrations afterwards. And for Josh, this is a debut in the World Grand Prix, and we sat down with him recently on the show, and he said he wasn't looking forward to the Grand Prix, joking that he's not the biggest fan of doubles and having to start on a double as well. But I think you've got to be excited about this game. Josh Rock, Michael van Gerwen, and I am interested to see how Josh does take to the format, because I know he's desperate to make a mark in one of these major events. We've not seen him go deep in one yet. We've seen him have a few runs to the last 16s, but if he wants to crack that top 16 before the end of the year, that is one of his big goals. The only way he's going to do that is to have a few wins in events like this, go to the quarterfinals, semi-finals and further, and that's a tough opener with Michael van Gerwen. But MVG not immune in this format to going out in the first round. We've seen him lose to John Henderson, Danny Noppert in the last few years, and this is probably the best time to play him is in that first round, because he's won, I think it's 5 of the last 9 World Grand Prix, and the 4 times that he's gone out twice, it has been in that first round. So if you want to get rid of Michael van Gerwen, this is the time to do it, and Josh Rock could well make a name for himself if he gets a win in this first round game.
Yeah, you said a few of the matches I was going to say, but you could have made a case for most of the first round ties, even the ones that have players that might be coming in a little struggling right now, but both of the players are struggling, so it makes it even more interesting. You know, like Peter Wright, Gabriel Clemens. Clemens has definitely regressed over the last 6 months, and we haven't talked about it as much. But Peter Wright, we have, and you know, both of them come in thinking this is a winnable first round tie for me. And that's what makes it good. You know, even if you have 2 players who might not be on their best form, if both of them are coming in at a similar level of confidence and a similar level of performance, it can be a really interesting match. But I want to focus on the matches where the players are coming in flying high, because there are a few of them. One, you mentioned there at the end, I'll start where you ended, MVG Josh Rock. MVG, not as consistent as he was 6 years ago, but there's flashes. You know, that match against Chris Dobie the other day, you know, it looked like MVG from 7-8 years ago, throwing in a 9-dart leg and not showing any emotion, averaging 123 for some of that match. It regressed over the course of the match, but not by that much. And it wasn't that Dobie was doing much wrong. MVG was just the MVG we used to know. But there's too many matches from him where he is playable, and there's too many matches where he's going to throw a 103, 104,
but his opponent's going to throw it back at him. And back in the day when his opponent threw it back at him, he lifted his game. He hit the right shot at the right time. He hasn't been doing that as much recently. That's been the big difference, and that's why he is more beatable. Maybe it's because he knows that he can't miss. He knows that his opponents are doing things to him that he used to do to them, and maybe that's what's affecting him. He is more beatable, even if he's playing as close to where he was 8 years ago as he has at any time since then. But Josh Rock can do everything that MVG can, and then some. You mentioned he still hasn't had that big television run. And some of that has been this year that he wasn't playing as well this year as he was last year. That's changed since the summer break. He added on another deep run on a Players' Championship event. He's starting to get some performances again. Yes, he hasn't won a title like he did last year, but he is putting himself in that contention over the past few weeks again. And I think that confidence is coming back, and that makes this a really difficult first round tie, especially if MVG struggles on his doubles. That's so much about this. You have upsets because if a player just doesn't get in, they can suddenly find themselves chasing, and it's a very short format at best of 3 sets. But even if MVG is playing well, Josh Rock can throw everything right back at him. I think that's a great first-round tie. Another one you mentioned, Aspinall Bunting. We don't need to talk about Aspinall. He won the last major title just a couple months ago. Bunting, on the other hand, I've said that he has been not necessarily quietly, but fairly under the radar, playing very good darts. Well, I clearly underestimated him because whatever he was playing was pathetic compared to what he did this past week. I mean, just absolutely ran bonkers over the field in the 3 Players' Championship events, even though he didn't win a title. Look at what he did on Wednesday in the first Players' Championship event. His worst performance, his worst average was 106.49 in the first round against Burton, even though he ended up losing in the last 16 to Christian Kist, who I mentioned earlier won his board all 3 days. He averaged 106.59 in that match, and the other 2 were well above that. Over the course of his last 14 matches up until the semifinal defeat to Gary Anderson, all 14 of those matches had been above his seasonal average heading back to the Players' Championships at the beginning of the season. That's just a phenomenal run of consistency, and not just consistency, but consistency that has been above your normal level for the year. Stephen Bunting has risen his game by miles in the past month. Can he keep it going? Well, obviously he can. He's a former world champion. He's a former Premier League player. And I think it's been building to this. I think Bunting, that change in his darts, the adding that weight, whatever it was, to just get something, to force himself to focus a little bit differently, to work on his game that little bit more because of something being new and something be different. It has clearly worked because this is a bullet we've never seen before. He is flying, and there's not a bulletproof jacket that can stop him if he's playing like that. But I'll just mention a couple other matches quickly. Rob Cross, Andrew Gilding. I know we were talking before we started recording, and you joked that Gilding's the best player in the world. I said maybe in his world. Gilding has definitely regressed over the past couple months, but he is still a major champion this year. He is still one of the better players in the world. Rob Cross has won a Euro Tour finally. He hasn't won a major this year, even though he's been pushing towards it, winning a pair of World Series events. But that's a tricky tie to have to go against Goldfinger in the first match. And I'll leave it with one more. Geraint Price against Danny Noppert. Noppert won another title this past week, beating Christian Kist. Gezzy's been that player that can average 110 and lose 6-2. It's just been a weird year for him. At least a weird few months, I should say, as when he plays well, he somehow gets defeated. But we didn't see him this past week in the Players' Championship events. Maybe that'll give him that little bit of energy he needs. He is still one of the best players in the world, but that is a dynamite first-round tie.
And now we'll move on to our first guest on this week's show. He's a 3-time Players' Championship title winner, one of the players involved in the World Grand Prix next week. Here's our chat with Callan Rydz. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by the 3 times Players' Championship title winner, Callan Rydz. Thanks for the time, Callan. How you doing?
Hi, mate. Yeah, all good. Just ready for this week ahead.
Yeah, we're talking just a day before the start of the World Grand Prix. You're going to be up against the world number one, the world champion Michael Smith. How much are you looking forward to that matchup tomorrow night in Leicester?
Yeah, I mean, listen, I haven't got the best record there, but I know he hasn't either. But again, you know, it's hard playing one of your friends, you know, stable mates as well. But we're both up there to do a job, and that's to, you know, feed the family.
Lots to catch up on with you since we last had you on the show. It was way back in November 2021, so a month later you were off to Ali Pali. You were the highest Pro Tour qualifier, and what a run that you had getting to the quarterfinals. What memories have stuck with you from those few weeks at Ali Pali?
Well, honestly, I think it was just winning the second game was massive for me, you know, beating Brendan, I think. And then obviously, because you see people all the time, I don't think he's one of these that can beat a top 32 player. You get it all the time. And when I beat Brendan, I was happy. I came home for Christmas, you know, all good spirits. And then I think it was, I played Aspinall, but that's when Nathan, God bless him, had his injury. And, you know, the draw opened up for us. I played Alan Suter in the last 16. Again, it was a great game, a good friend. I've knew Alan a long time, but losing to Peter, it broke my heart a little bit, so I feel like I should have won that game. I'm not saying by any means I think I could have won it. Not at all, but, you know, you think, oh, you know, I would have played Gary in the semis. I think the way I was playing, I think I would have beat Gary. And then you've got that one game that can change your life.
Yeah, you were on such good form for those few weeks, a lot of high 90s, low 100 averages during your run, and it's a tournament like no other because you do have, as you mentioned, you go home for Christmas, you come back to play the next round, you've got the New Year's break as well, and New Year's Day is traditionally when the quarterfinals take place. That must have been a surreal experience, going to sleep New Year's Eve to wake up the next day, starting your year with a World Championship quarterfinal.
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of these that I like going out on New Year's Day with all my friends, you know, and I got sent a lot of videos on Snapchat of all the pubs back home in Bedlington, everyone jumping, screaming. You know, I went home the next day and everyone that I spoke to went, you made our New Year's Day. You know, yeah, you lost, but you made everyone in Bedlington proud, and that in a moment for itself will stick with me forever.
Yeah, definitely should, and it was such a close game with Peter Wright in that quarterfinals, losing in the extra legs, and we move on to the rest of 2022, and you had another major run in the quarterfinals, getting to Minehead. You had a semi-final on the Euro Tour as well, but how did you feel 2022 went for you? What was the main feeling about how last season went? Did you expect more, or were you happy with what you got?
I think I expected too much. It didn't happen. But, you know, I made pretty much all the majors, which was, you know, a plan in myself. But again, I didn't perform well last year. Haven't really performed well this year until the last couple of weekends, and that's got us where I am.
Yeah, we know it's been a tough time for you as well, and I think it was around May this year you posted on social media about you were struggling in a horrible place, and we saw a lot of people comment offering their support to you. Can you talk to us about that time?
Yeah, I just had enough. I got sick of how to say it. I got sick of travelling. I got sick of going to places I didn't want to be there. Didn't really want to play darts. And I know and I understand people will bet on you. I've got no issue with that. But if I'm the one that loses you know, £1.52, don't sit there and give me death threats, because I know people say, oh, just ignore it. It's the first thing you see on your phone when you get back to the table. So it's hard to ignore it. And yeah, I think I've calmed down loads. I used to bite all the time. I used to say things to them. I don't now. I came off everything for a little bit, and yeah, I'm in a much better place now than I was then, which is good.
No, glad to hear it. And you mentioned about social media there. We know it can be a toxic place at times, and we've seen that you've took yourself off a lot of the social medias as well. I'm guessing that was the reason for coming off places like Twitter, was because of what the comments you were getting.
Yeah, it's normally just the same thing. Oh, sort this out, sort that out. But then it's even on TikTok. I'm on TikTok. I don't post videos. I watch it. Some lads on there, he made a video and everything he said about me was false. I was like, I commented on it. I did bite, and I was like, you're just a helmet. I went, if you're going to make a video about us, at least say the truth. Don't make up a load of lies for a little bit more views to get some money in your pocket. Say the truth, or just keep my name out your mouth, because I don't like stuff like that. Yeah, it bothers us, obviously. I don't mind people saying stuff about me. It's when they mention your family. I hope your family get this. I hope your family get that. That is the thing where how can you keep your mouth shut at that? Because I couldn't. I've snapped at a few people.
Yeah, there's really no need for that. And well, back to yourself, and you say you're in a much better place now, which is great to hear. And fast forward, 4 or 5 months since then, you've got back to winning ways, winning a title, you've qualified for the World Grand Prix, so things are looking on the up again. How did you overcome that tough period and get to where you are now?
Well, I've got to say my partner, she was a massive help. And I think as well, we've just bought 2 little puppies, and I was in the house alone Monday to Friday from 8:30 in the morning till 5, and we've got our own place now. I've moved out of Bedlington, so I'm not around like my family or anything. I'm not too far away, but it's not walking distance, whereas I used to be able to just walk down to my granddad's from my mum's. It was 7 doors down the road. Whereas now we've got to try to arrange to meet up, and it's took some time, but I'm getting there slowly, so I'm happy with that.
We noticed during your run to the title recently a change in your throw. You've slowed down, new equipment as well. Can you talk us through those changes, how they all came about?
Well, I think the throw, as people see in my darts stand up on the board, so sometimes if I throw them too quick, they started landing flat, not as in I was going to stack them, but quite flat into the board. And I'm quite quick. I just like to get on with things. And when that happened, I would still just, instead of taking my time that extra second, but I wanted a new barrel. I wanted something different because nothing was going right with the barrels I was using. And Unicorn sent us 10 sets of darts up, because I've never really had the luxury of, designing my own barrel. It's not for me, designing stuff, just I'll throw anything. And they sent us the setup I've got now that I'm using, and I took them to a local event by me, and that's the first time I've really tried to slow my game down a lot, and I just battered everyone. I won one final, lost in the second final. So yeah, just since then I was like, yeah, I'm just going to use these, and then obviously won a Pro Tour title with them. Didn't expect it. The semis the next day, and then that's when someone said, oh, you're in the Grand Prix. So again, that's another thing about social media I don't like. You might not want to know, but social media will tell you what you need and what people have to do. I didn't like it at all. I left all my group chats the weekend gone. I don't want to hear anything about the Grand Prix, because I know I'm not safe. But when I was confirmed I was safe, I went back in. But yeah, when I found out I was in the Grand Prix, I was probably the happiest man alive.
Yeah, I was going to say about last weekend, we had the cut-off for the World Grand Prix. You weren't involved in that Euro Tour, and I was going to say you're a player that follows all the matches, but it sounds like you switched everything off and you waited until you got that confirmation, I'm guessing, from your manager or someone else that you were in the field.
No, actually, funny enough, me and my partner, we took my dogs away up to a caravan, just had a weekend away. And I'm not the biggest fan of watching darts at all, but I was saying to her, I'm going to watch Luke Woodhouse's games. Obviously, he's my best friend on tour. Spend a lot of time with Luke. I think pretty much most people know that. I'll watch Luke, Gian, and Ricardo. Obviously, Ricardo lost on the Friday, which was like a bonus for me. But obviously, I knew it was Gian really that could push me out, if that makes sense. When I seen he got beat off Demo, we were actually eating a meal. We had our families up on the Sunday. And I couldn't touch my meal until the game was over, so I felt sick. I felt physically sick.
Well, you get over the line, you get the spot in the World Grand Prix, and you've been in action this week as well. It's been quite a busy week with those Players' Championships, and you've caught the eye on one of the streams, one of your points, snapping off your darts. You end up playing a leg with 2 darts. Has that ever happened before?
No, I mean, to be fair, they were quite old points. It's the points I've been using for a long time, since my first barrel with Unicorn was out. Yeah, but when I repointed them, the point that actually snapped, it was rusty on the inside. So I don't know whether it's just old points or whatever. But to be fair, that game I played better with 2 than I did 3.
Yeah, I was going to say, it was fun watching you hit 120s with 2 darts, and we were all praying for that treble 17 to go in so you could try and take out the 101 in 2 darts. So what was the reaction like in the back room after the game from your fellow players when they heard about it or saw the video online?
Well, it was the Sunday. Oh God, it's Sunday today. What day was it? Friday. Yeah. Daryl Journey came up to us. He went, "I've never seen that." He went, "That's really impressive." I went, "I might just start using 2." I was hitting more trebles with 2 than I did with 3. But lucky enough, I got some points off Ross Smith. So big thank you to Ross to help us out. Ryan Joyce as well. He gave us a set of points that were a little bit shorter than what I use. But again, I'm really, appreciative of people that will sit there and try and help you.
We saw you got some new points in your darts now, but are you going to be bringing a spare set of darts with you in the future in case it happens again?
Nah, I'll just use 2.
Fair enough. Well, a few more before we let you go. Let's circle back to next week, the World Grand Prix. Michael Smith, as we've said, first up in round 1. You've played a couple of World Grand Prix now, so how do you prepare for an event like this with that double start? Are you practicing more on the doubles? Are you practicing legs 501 starting on a double?
No, I had a practice yesterday. I went to watch Northumberland County Darts, my local county that I played for 3 or 4 years for. I was just practicing with the lads there. We've done 1-2-1, but obviously you start on a double as well. So it makes it the little bit more challenging. Say you've got to start on a double for 1-2-1, then obviously finish. That's all I was really doing yesterday. And then I had a few legs of like 501, double in, but not loads. So obviously we've just came back from, like I say, Barnsley, and you're practicing, 3 hours each day before you even play there. So you're doing 9 hours, and then, yesterday I'd done about 2 hours. So my preparation's good. It's just seeing what happens on the big stage.
And you and Michael, as you touched on, you're in the same management, darting promotions with Mark Pritchard, and we saw you and Michael, you were away together in Tenerife a few months ago, and you were asking people to send you drinks. We saw Nathan Aspinall got an order in. What was the worst drink that you guys got ordered?
Tequila. But Smithy didn't want people to know this, and I'm going to say it. He was giving the drinks away to me when people were ordering shots for him. I was the one drinking them.
Oh, shocking.
He did have a few towards the end. He did have I think we all had to be fair, I think there was about 15 of us there at the time. I think all we had a good drink that night.
Good times. And lastly, we should touch on your beloved Newcastle as well. They're in the Champions League. Have you got any plans to go to any of the away games? Dortmund, PSG, they look like they could be decent trips to go to.
Yeah, well, I would have went to Milan, but obviously we had too much on. I was going to go to PSG at home, next week, but touch wood, I can't. Hopefully not. Hopefully I'll still be in the Grand Prix. But yeah, I think I'm going to try Paris away. I think that's the one I'm going to try for. Very
nice. Well, enjoy the trip if it comes off, Callan. Good luck with the World Grand Prix and everything else you've got coming up for the rest of the year, and appreciate the time.
Thanks, bud. Cheers, mate.
Thanks again to Callan for joining us. Moving on then from the World Grand Prix, let's look to Beau Greaves, the reigning WDF Women's World Champion, has announced that she is going to play in the WDF Women's World Championship in December. She is going to play at Lakeside, and as a result gives up her spot in the PDC World Championship at Ali Pali. So what were your thoughts on her decision, and do you think this will change the PDC's stance for future years?
I don't think it'll change the PDC's stance because the PDC doesn't need her there. Obviously, it would help, and it's just going to be free marketing for the PDC that entire week unless she goes out early. But I don't assume Beau Greaves is going to go out early at the Lakeside. It's just going to be free advertising if she was then going to turn around and play in the PDC a few days later. But the PDC, again, don't necessarily need that advertising. And the biggest draw right now in women's starts in terms of getting more eyeballs to turn into Sky is not Beau Greaves. It's still Fallon Sherrick. And that might change in the future. And that certainly would change if Beau Greaves were at the PDC World Championship. If she did go and beat someone, if she did go and beat a few people like she's capable of. But the PDC don't need her. And she was offered not a £25,000 appearance fee, but as close to a £25,000 appearance fee as you can get, because she is going to be, and rightfully so, the heavy favorite there. And there is a much better chance that she wins the title and wins therefore £25,000 than she does win a couple matches at the Alexandra Palace to win the £25,000. So in terms of financial benefit to her, going to the Lakeside makes sense, and she also then could call herself a world champion. This might indicate that she doesn't think she's ready for Q School. We'll see. Maybe she just decided what financially made the most sense. But I think if she was planning to go to Q School, she would have decided to do the PDC, because getting those extra matches on the big stage against the players that she will have to play against if she ends up winning a tour card would have been a very important step for her. But she can still get some of that experience at the Grand Slam, assuming she shows up. And maybe that will be what she's looking more to do, because those shorter formats are more like Pro Tour events. Okay, it's a little bit shorter than a Pro Tour event, best out of 9 compared to best out of 11, but it's still a similar format except on the big stage, and she can start to wet her feet for that to prepare for Q School that way, as opposed to set play at the World Championships. But I don't think you can blame her for this. In terms of becoming a world champion again, in terms of winning £25,000, those two things are much simpler, or at least much more easily attainable at the Lakeside than they would be at the PDC World Championships. And at this stage in her career, trying to get some financial stability, trying to get some financial independence in her life makes sense. She's still very young, and she still has a lot of life to grow and learn and live through. So I can't blame her for it. But I do think this might be an indication that she doesn't think she's ready for Q School. And if she doesn't think she's ready for Q School, then she's not.
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. And we spoke about this on the show last week or the week before about the PDC starts not allowing players to play at Ali Pali if they also play at Lakeside a few weeks before. And it's a decision which didn't get the best reaction from fans, and it's left a few players who have already qualified for both events a decision to make as to which one they're going to play in. Luke Littler, he came out straight away, said, I'm going to go to Ali Pali, so he's missing out on the WDF men's and boys world championships. Beau Greaves, that was the player that we were all waiting to hear from. Would she go to Ali Pali again, or would she try and defend that women's world championship that she won last year? And it is a tough decision to make, and for me personally, I'm glad that she has opted for Lakeside this time round. And she said on the WDF website that winning the world championship last year was one of the proudest moments in my darting career. I want to defend that title. That's why I've chosen to play at Lakeside. I'm still in the early stages of my darting career, and having the opportunity to become a multiple time world champion is hugely motivating. I'm playing well at the moment, and I can't wait to get back out on that stage in December. So that's Beau's reasoning behind the decision. And it would have been a real blow for the WDF had Beau gone with the PDC World Championships instead of going to defend the title. And she is arguably the biggest star that they've got in their championships across the men's, women's and the youth events that are going to be going on that week. So for her to potentially defend the title, join that small group of players that have won multiple women's world titles, I think she's going to have a great chance of doing so. She is going to, as you say, go in as a big favourite, and there is no Fallon Sherrick there. There is no Mikuru Suzuki in that field, but you have got some tricky obstacles there. You've got Lisa Ashton, Rhiannon O'Sullivan and some other players that are going to test her, but she will be heavily fancied to defend that title. And yeah, like I say, for me personally, I was pleased to see her go with the WDF this time round. And as for where the PDC stance is going forward, it's probably a question for Matt Porter, the PDC chief exec, who, if you've seen on our social media, we are going to have a chat with him on the show next week. So if you have got any questions for Matt, do get them in. This is your chance to ask the PDC your questions, so don't miss out on that. But you'd like to think that Beau's decision to go for Lakeside and turn down Ali Pally, it'd at least make the PDC have that conversation behind the scenes amongst themselves and review it. Did they make the right call? Have we perhaps harmed ourselves by making players choose? And has it had a detrimental effect on their event? And as much as Beau picking Lakeside boosts their event, not having her at Ali Pally, I think it does hurt that event, because a lot of fans, they'll want to see that the top female player play at the Ali Pally, play with the world's best again. So I think once the dust has settled, we've had the 2 World Championships and we come into next year, and I think they will sit down and have a rethink, because like I said, I don't see a reason why players who qualify for both events can't play in both, and especially the ladies who have only got 1 World Championships of their own at the Lakeside. I think to be able to play the PDC one as well, I don't really see an issue with it personally. But yeah, maybe one player making this decision is not going to make too much of a change, but you'd like to think there might be some talks behind the scenes and a rethink maybe on what their stance is at the moment.
So the WDF World Cup, as I mentioned earlier, since we were recording during it, concludes today as of when we're recording. Still the team event final still to come, but everything else has concluded, at least among the seniors. Have any players, though, caught your eye so far?
Yeah, we're into the last knock-ins now of the WDF World Cup, and as you say, we've got the team finals going on at the moment, and we just spoke about her, Beau Greaves. She's had a good week of it in Denmark, winning the ladies pairs alongside Dieter Hedman, and then I think an hour or so ago now beating Dieter Hedman in the ladies singles finals. And as far as the men's events, you had the pairs going on. The New Zealand team of Haupai Puha, a recent guest on the show, he partnered up with Ben Robb to win the title. And just as we started recording the show, we had the men's singles, Berry Van Peer beating Frank Bruns of Germany 7-3 to win that title. And I was having a look at the men's singles, how that event played out over the week, and you had Berry Van Peer, Haupai Puha, 2 players that we know well, but there's a lot of surprise names that made it to the quarterfinals. You had Bruce Robbins from America, Marcus Stroud from Austria, Robbie Mills, a Canadian player, getting to the semi-finals. You had Carlos Arola from Catalonia getting to the semi-finals as well, and those 2 in particular, the players that lost out in the semis. Carlos's run, beating the likes of John Michael, Stefan Belmont, who we've seen on the Euro Tour. He had a 98 average in that one. He beat Raymond Smith as well in the last 16, Haupai Puha in the quarterfinals. So he's had some scalps on that run to the semi-finals, and Robbie Mills as well getting to the semis. He had a good run, kicked off the day with a 101 average, a 95, a 94 in there. So some good performances there from him. And the losing finalist in the end, Frank Bruns from Germany, his average for the tournament around about 80. So it wasn't the highest standard that we saw from across the field of players, and could have gone out in the first round. He had to come through a decider in his first game, but had some good wins on the way to getting to the final, and just ran up short against Berry Van Peer. And as for the ladies event, I mentioned about Beau Greaves and Dieter Hedman in the final. You had 2 other players that we know well, Noah Lynn van Leuven and Kirsi Vinnakainen, the losing semi-finalist. And with Noah Lynn, looked pretty solid throughout the tournament, 80 averages, low to mid 80 averages. I think she just dropped 1 leg on the way to the semi-finals before losing out to Beau Greaves. And as for Kirsi, someone that we've seen a few times on the streams in the PDC Women's Series, Finnish player, got to the women's pairs final as well, and her run in particular, the first round, what a draw that was. Lorraine Winstanley first up, beating her 4-3, so that's a tough first round draw there. But for me, I think this event overall, it was good to see it come back, because it was the first one that we've had since 2019, and I think it's usually on every other year, every couple of years. So because of the pandemic, we didn't see one a couple of years ago. And just lastly, want to say a shout out as well to our good friend of the show, Andrew Sinclair. He's out there in Denmark at the moment, and he was doing a good job, I think, with the WDF's social media. He was also in the commentary box as well on the stream as well. And I think these events, they are why the WDF needs to be around. They have an important role in darts, and it's good to see just a lot of players from a lot of different countries from around the world come together for this event this week, the World Cup. And say we've spoke about some players here that we've not heard too much about before, from countries that we haven't spoke about before, but we can see that there's certainly some talent there.
Exactly. And I mean, if you would ask me which of these names are made up of the semifinalists in the men's singles before the week had started, I obviously knew Barry Vampire. I would have probably guessed you had made up the other three names. I never heard of any of those semifinalists, but they all are in their spot there. And, they played some decent stuff. Look at those quarterfinals. They all averaged over 85. That's not spectacular, but that's fairly good darts at the second tier level, that level below PDC, at the low, at the Challenge Tour level. That's going to win more than half the matches. And, Robbie Mills, he threw back-to-back 90-plus averages in the last 16 in the quarterfinals. Carlos Arola was just under the 90 and beating Halpaipua, who you mentioned, a player who we've seen before on the big stage in the PDC, qualifying for the World Series finals based on his performances in New Zealand in the World Series events. Those are some pretty good performances. Beau Greaves had back-to-back averages over 100 on the way to the singles title, also winning the pairs with the person she beat in the finals, Dita Hedman. You mentioned Kirsi Vinakainen made the semifinals in the women's singles. She also, with fellow Finn, who I'd never heard of, Sari Savola, made it to the final of that event. But I even want to mention, some things from the team events. England women's obviously were the heavy favorite, not just because they had Beau Greaves, but also Dita Hedman, Lorraine Winstanley, Claire Brooke, and that's a fairly good team. But they got upset in the semifinals against Wales. And I mean, we know Rhiannon O'Sullivan. We know she's a very good player. And, the two legs she won were in 17 and 16 darts. We expect that from her. But what we don't necessarily expect was some of those other players who we haven't seen before. Eve Watson and Alana Waters-Evans in particular. We've heard of Leanne Topper. We've seen her play a little bit before. But I'd not seen much of Eve Watson and Alana Waters-Evans. And they didn't do the best in the singles. Eve Watson went out her first match. Alana Waters-Evans won a few matches but couldn't break 70. But in the team event, Alana Waters-Evans won her last two legs in 16 and 19 darts. That's not too bad, especially considering that 19 darter was against Beau Greaves. Eve Watson, her last two legs that she won were in 16 and 15 darts, with a leg in between that where she had a chance to beat Beau Greaves but lost. That's some really good darts with the pressure on at the back end of that match to upset Team England by the two Welsh players that we knew the least about. So I have to say that caught my eye, even if their singles performances weren't as good. And that's why Team England, the heavy favorites in the women's event, lost in the semifinals.
We're going to be back in a moment to answer some of your listener questions, but before we do, let's get to a special report brought to you by Matthew Kiernan, the darting nerd. He was at the Spots and Stripes in London Bridge recently for the ADC playoff to get into the Modus Super Series, and he speaks with two players, Stephen Plumstead and Ben Payne, and gives his thoughts on how the ADC is currently going. So enjoy this report from Matthew.
Well, hello and welcome to a special edition of Under the 128. I'm Matthew Kiernan, and you can find me on the usual social media channels at The Darting Nerd. Now, I'm here at the Spots and Stripes at London Bridge for an amateur darts circuit playoff for the London and South East region. The winner of this 30-player field will win 2 days at the Modus Super Series and a chance to play Richard North for the area title belt. Now, things have really moved on for the ADC and Modus since we last spoke. We've seen the Vault expand to an increased number of venues across the UK, and we've seen an increased number of ADC participants take part in Modus, including from Europe. So all of this is really encouraging, of course, but what do the players think? Why don't we ask them? Stephen, great to see you. What brings you here to the Spots and Stripes?
So today we are here because I've reached the Modus qualifier after how did I reach it? That's a good question. I qualified.
You won some events, didn't you, to get here in the south, not the southwest, but the south.
South East, yeah, the South East qualifiers through Chichester events, ADC Chichester events. Gained enough ranking points from there, and then topped it up with some good wins up at Middlesbrough a few weeks ago. 6.5 hour trip up there, but it was worth it to get a few points and be able to qualify for this. So yeah, it was all worth it.
And you've been chasing points, haven't you? Because it means a lot to get to events like this, doesn't it?
Absolutely. So when I started playing the ADCs, I was living on the Isle of Wight. Managed to travel to Salisbury on a Monday night, which took 4 hours door to door, which wasn't a good experience, but it was worth it to qualify for the Southwest Modus qualifying event. Ended up winning it, and I've got a week on Modus in January, so it was a lot of hard work, a lot of money. I definitely spent more money when I weren't doing that, but it's definitely worth it in the long run. I've got a week on TV, which you can't really buy, so I'm really, really happy.
How was that as an experience at Modus?
So it's in January 15th, so it's just keeping my arm going until then, really, and to be honest, it's getting my motivation back, because I've played for the last 6-7 months a lot of ADC events, a lot of local events, knowing that that's the main goal, really, and I've reached it a few weeks ago, and I have been struggling to practice and struggling to get my throw back, really. So today's a good place to start to sort of get some form back and just get prepared for January. Really got quite a few months to go, get some good hours in, get some good matches in, and see how we go. And
how do you rate the ADC as an organisation and the opportunities that it's given you? Is that a thumbs up?
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, I can't really fault it. You look at the vaults at £6. You play at least 5 games a night if there's 6 in your group. If you get to the final, I think you win. You play 8 games. So for £6, you're not going to get anywhere else. So, and the quality's just getting better and better. The vault I'm playing now on Fareham, which is closer to me now. I'm living on the mainland. The standard there is just ridiculous. You've got 3 or 4, if not more, Modus players there playing each week. And if you're stuck in a group of them, then it makes for a hard night. But yeah, it's a good bunch of lads and it's a good laugh. So
thank you so much for your time. Good luck today.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you ever so much to Stephen Plumstead for his time there talking to me at the Spots and Stripes. Now, I did have visions of speaking to a variety of players at the tournament, but as you know with these things, when the tournament gets in full flow, it can be quite tricky to pin players down, and obviously they're preparing for the next match, and it was only 32 players in the field, so it was quite a quick turnaround between games, so I wasn't able to get any more interviews other than the winner, but I was able to speak to a lot of the players that were in the field, and a few of them did talk to me off the record. They didn't want to come on the record for reasons that you'll hear about shortly, so I'm just going to relay to you what they told me about the ADC and their genuine thoughts, because as we know, darts players of all levels, whether they're at PDC Tour Guide or right down to grassroots, they've all got an opinion, haven't they? So, but the best way to see what people think of the ADC is, of course, to speak to the players themselves. So the first player that spoke to me, he was very clear that he said to me he would never play an ADC event again, which shocked me, actually, in all honesty. But his opinion was that the odds are very much stacked against him. And his argument was that, well, I can't play in the vaults, which of course is the big topic at the moment and the big thing that the ADC are pushing, and quite rightly. And he felt that he wasn't going to be able to get the points needed to qualify for the playoffs, the regional playoffs, which the players all strive towards in each region, the 32, and then you get in, and the winner gets into the Modus Super Series that way. He wasn't going to be able to do that, so he said, no, I'm going to go back to Super League, and I'm very happy doing that. Fine. So that was probably an outlier in terms of the people that I spoke to. Another person that said to me, and he's a regular Super League player, that actually in his area, Super League teams are now actually struggling to get teams together. There's only teams of 6 in that particular region because they're losing players to vaults because they're chasing points in the ADC. So that's an interesting point. I think that question has been put to Steve Brown on a different media outlet before. Steve Brown didn't seem too worried, and in fairness, why would you be? Super League doesn't necessarily affect the ADC. The Super League will always likely survive, even with the ADC, but it just goes to show that there are players that are now thinking about that and making that choice between the old Super League format, which of course was the only thing really for players of a decent standard, above pub standard, but not quite, or definitely county level or trying to be county level. Now there are more options, and the ADC does provide those. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out in the coming months and over the next year. Is Super League going to be affected by the ADC? Is the ADC a threat in that particular department? The interesting point, I thought, was the third player that was able to speak to me off the record. Now, what you've got to remember is that in the vaults, and the vaults are very, very popular now. I mean, by the time you hear this, it's now in its 4th cycle. So for those of you that don't know what vaults are, these are the round robins which take place weekly at a venue. I have to say, it's a great concept. And this is, if you remember, if you've listened to the show for a while, this was one of the things that we were calling on the ADC, or even MAD when it was called that, to release, because this is a really good format. So you get a capped number of players, 24 on a night. You all play 4 or 5 games, best of 3 legs, and then you're in a round robin, you're in a group, and then you all go through into a last 8 semi-final and then final. It's a really good idea, I would say. Basically, in each region, there's 9 regions in the UK, there is a ranking table for all the vaults in your region, and if you finish in the top 8 of that, you then get a cash bonus, and the cash bonuses are actually quite good. So the winner would probably get around £1,000 bonus. But obviously, you're paying into each vault that you play in order to get that. So that's really the sort of the cash bonus aspect that all the players are striving towards. Now, the player that I was speaking to, he was around 5th. Now, remember, it's only the top 10 that get this bonus. He was around 5th, and his complaint, and it's a very valid one, I feel, is that there's no actual limit to the number of vaults you can play in, because the idea, of course, is that you play in 1 in a week at least in your local venue, which is a good concept that supports that local venue, brings in the revenue for them. It's yada yada yada. You get the idea. But you could conceivably play in multiple vaults in a week. And one of the points this is made, Adam Mould was the organiser of the playoff at the Spots and Stripes, did an absolutely brilliant job. People tease Adam because, and he won't mind me saying this, people tease him because, of course, he lives in a really popular area for these vaults, and he can drive and travel to them on potentially multiple nights. And of course, the more you play in, the more points you're going to get, and then the more chance you have of winning this cash bonus. So is the argument, therefore, at that point, does it not then become a competition to see who could do the most number of competitions, as opposed to it being based on your talent? Because of course, if you look at anything the PDC does, and even the WDF, those ranking tables, well, it's an even playing field to mostly, because it's based on the minimum number of events, or it's capped at a certain number of events that you can play in, as opposed to the vaults where you can just play in as many as you like. So there was someone ahead of this chap that I was talking to that was doing 4 in a week because he could. And even though that player felt that he was more talented than the player that was doing 4 in a week. So that's an interesting point. I mean, obviously, that's a question that we'd love to put to the ADC in future, and hopefully we can get either Scott Hunt or Steve Brown on in the future to talk about that and to put that to them. You know, is it fair that someone would just do loads of vaults in a week compared to, you know, most people that can only do 1 or 2? It's an interesting thought, and of course, it's very early days for the vault. And it will take time to finesse the rules of these. What you have to ask yourself is that if you were good enough, or if you were just even had a passing interest in darts, would you enter them? Now, you know, obviously I have a baby at the moment who came with me to this event actually, and she paid herself, thank God. But if I didn't, and if I had oodles of time, and if I was in a fantasy universe, where I was averaging, say, 60, would you choose to go to a Super League game, which probably starts at 8:30, and there's some pairs, 1 game of pairs and 1 singles, and it'll finish at 11, and it could be halfway across the county, then you've got to get home, and then you've got to go to work the next day, option 1, or option 2, would you go to a vault competition and knowing that you're at least going to get 4 or 5 games plus another potentially 3 and win some money as well? Well, really, when you stack the 2 up, they don't really compare, do they? And that's really, I think, what the vaults do have going for them, because darts players love a financial incentive, don't they? Well, don't we all? And being part of that wider regional aspect, and then of course you can go to this national event, which hasn't even happened yet. If you do win if you do well in your region, which I really love, I think that's a great concept. Do well in your region, go to a big national final. That really does tick all the boxes for me. So that would be interesting to see how that pans out in the future. So we're going to go on to our last interview now on this special edition. Now, what was quite amusing was in advance of this, a few weeks before this was recorded, Steve Brown actually commented to another media outlet and said that he's seen players fall to their knees and cry when they've qualified. Now, I have to say, I saw that comment. I was like, well, I'm not so sure about that, but okay, if that's what you've seen, fine. The winner of this competition was Ben Payne. He played very well. You can see the final on my YouTube channel at the Darting Nerd. He didn't quite fall to his knees and cry, but he was very happy, and it did really bring home to me just how much the Modus Super Series does mean to players like Ben, and how important that route for the ADC into the Modus Super Series is. So here's our chat with Ben after he qualified. Ben Payne, congratulations.
Cheers.
You're going to the Modus Super Series. How does that sound?
I don't know, it's still a bit surreal to be honest. I know obviously if I play my game I've got like the level to compete with the better players, but you know, coming in almost as a reserve because of people dropping out, you know, I thought, oh, go and have a little go, play against the better players that are going to be in and around, and you know, actually played pretty well in a few games. Obviously a few of the games I didn't really want to have to play, especially against like, you know, good mates and stuff, but yeah, it's mental.
Is that difficult to play friends?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I know obviously playing Craig and Darren quite a bit, I know full well that when I come up against them I've got to be throwing well, and you know, I rode my luck in a lot of the legs, especially even against Adam in the quarter-final. For 5-3 down, I had to start playing well to bring it back, and luckily I did really, so yeah, I'll definitely take it. I'm not going to complain to that.
Your thoughts on the ADC who have given you this chance?
Yeah, I think the ADC is a brilliant idea. I mean, for people that obviously aren't, you know, maybe at the level of county and wanting to do WDF, I think it's more of a
it's more of a portal into playing sort of more competitive darts than just pub league. So I think it's a good level for, you know, maybe the lesser player to come in, because, you know, playing vault and stuff like that, you can just come along to the vault for, you know, just to have a throw of darts and see how you're going, and, you know, potentially improve your game. So yeah, I think it's a good thing.
And just lastly, your plans between now and August for when you'll be, later on in the year when you'll be playing at the Super Series?
The first thing will definitely be going into work and telling my boss that I need to take unpaid leave because I'm not going to be there. So, well, I don't think that's going to go down too well, but we'll have to see when I go into work on Monday.
Well, I'm sure you'll negotiate that well. Fantastic. Congratulations again. Good luck.
Thank you very much, mate.
Thanks again to Matthew for that report. And now we'll finish up the show with a couple of listener questions. The first one that we've got comes in from Gary Ormiston, who says, has it ever been suggested that in the lead up to the Grand Prix that at one of the Pro Tours they have a double start to get players tuned in? If so, how far did it get?
I don't know if the PDC's ever talked about it, and I know we're trying to get Matt Porter on sometime soon, and maybe that's a good question to ask him, because I know we've talked about that ourselves. I know I've at the very least have said it's a change I would like to see, those Players' Championship events in the lead up to the World Grand Prix being a double in, and maybe another set at some point in the year, you know, something to make it a little bit different. You know, there's 30 Players' Championship events. Most of them should be the normal format, but maybe 6 or 8 of them over the course of the year, you can do something different so that there's some variety, and to make those events just stand out a little bit more. Having these 3 in the lead up to the World Grand Prix be double in, I think would be a pretty good change. That said, I don't know if the PDC's ever talked about it. I think it's something we should definitely ask to see if it's something they've talked about. We've had guests on who've mentioned it. I think Paul Nicholson has said that before when we've had him on. I'm sure some other people have as well. But I don't know if it's been anything official. But it is something that I know we and a few other people have mentioned.
Yeah, I was going to say the same as well about asking Matt Porter next week, and maybe it's a good time to ask him because we have got the World Grand Prix going on when we talk to him. And for me, I'm like you, I'm not aware of any discussions that have gone on with the PDC with regards to making the Players' Championships just before the World Grand Prix a double-in, double-out format. And it is something that we have seen discussed on social media before by darts fans. They've suggested it. Why not make those events just before the double-in format? And I think it built up quite a bit of traction, particularly when the Grand Prix was in Dublin and they had those 2 Players' Championships in the same venue just before the Grand Prix. And I think it was the City West Hotel in Dublin, the Jazzy Carpet, when the PDC had just started streaming those floor events. So it's a good idea, and I think it would be something different. But at the same time, with these Players' Championships, should they keep them all 30 the same? I'm in agreement with that side of things. I think that the format for these Players' Championships should be the same for all of them. And okay, it would be good for the players that are in the Grand Prix to get that early bit of match practice with that double in, double out. But you've got 3/4 of the field in these Players' Championships that aren't going to be in the Grand Prix. So it isn't going to benefit them because they're not going to be playing in the Grand Prix. So I'm going to go with the side of sticking with the format as the same for all of them. And we have got some unique formats in the PDC, like the UK Open, the FA Cup style draw, the World Cup now being all pairs, and the Grand Prix being double in, double out. And to make more events double in, double out, would that kind of take away how special the Grand Prix is because it is just that one event a year on the PDC calendar? Perhaps it would. So maybe we could look at some other formats to introduce. There's going to be some more free weekends next year on the PDC calendar. But for me, I like it as it is, the double in, double out, one event, the Grand Prix.
Ooh, some disagreement then. But we have one more listener question. This one comes from Elliot. If I offered you free tickets or access to a full calendar month of events on next year's PDC calendar, which month would you pick and why?
That's very kind of you, Elliot. And he always comes in with some great questions for us as well. And this is another one. And I was having a little look at the calendar earlier. There's a few options I'd go for or consider anyway. And starting off with January, there's not a lot of activity in January. You would catch the last 3 days of the World Championship. So if you want to tick off the bucket list going to a world final, then you'd probably go with January. But aside from that, you've got a couple of World Series events that have been announced in Bahrain and the Netherlands, so you get to go to them ones as well. February to May time, you're looking at a lot of Premier League nights and Euro tours, so you're going to probably get to feel like what it is as a player going from the Premier League to the Euro tours. So a lot of travelling, so by the end of the month you might be a little bit tired, but I think March would be a good one. You've got the UK Open, which is always a good event to attend. You've got 4 Premier League nights that month as well. I think there's one in Dublin that month, and you've got 2 Euro tours in, I think, both in Germany. So that'd be quite an entertaining month. For me though, I'm looking towards the summer. I'm looking at either June. You've got the World Cup. I think the World Series in America is in June as well. So if flights and accommodation are included in this budget from Elliot, then I think I'm going to be going for June. But if the budget just stretches to tickets only, then I think I'm going to have to go with July. A week in Blackpool, you can't say no to that. The World Match Play, getting to see that event from start to finish, and there might be a couple other events in there with the World Series that get announced. So I think for me, if budget is money's no object, I should say, then I'm going to go with either March or June. If I'm funding it past the tickets, then sign me up for Blackpool and the Match Play.
Yeah, I looked first to see if there's any calendar that exists that doesn't have 12 months in it, that has a fewer amount. I couldn't find one, unfortunately. So I tried to find a way around this question. But I decided to stick to the normal Gregorian calendar as announced. And I really want to go to Australia and New Zealand, but they're not on the calendar yet. So even though almost certainly they'll be in August, and I've never been there. It's not on the calendar yet, so I'm going to have to leave it off. But I think I'm going to say September, just because I love the Euro Tour. And to get 3 Euro Tour events in 3 places that I've never been before just sounds awesome. I haven't been to Antwerp. I've been to Belgium, but I've only been to Brussels. To get Budapest, I've never been to Hungary, and I would like to go. Basel, I've been elsewhere in Switzerland. I somehow didn't get bankrupted spending 6 days in Switzerland, but I made it through. But I didn't get to Basel, and to go see the GOAT Roger Federer's hometown, and not to mention the first ever Euro Tour in Switzerland, sounds awesome. But beyond, on top of that, the World Series of Darts finals in Amsterdam, a bunch of Players Championship events, a few Women's Series events if I decide to fly home early from Antwerp. It seems like just a really good month of darts, and at the end of it, maybe I can pay my own way to go to Wigan and the great town of TBC for the World Grand Prix. So I'll say September. Anything else for this week?
Well, as always, we have to say thank you to Darts Corner for supporting the show. They are the world's #1 online darts retailer. So if you're in the UK like me, it's dartscorner.co.uk. If you're in America with Burton, it is dartscorner.com. Lots of exciting stuff coming out on there. Darts, dartboards, you name it, they've got it. So go and check them out. Thanks to our guests for joining us at the time of recording. We're not sure who we've got, if we've got anyone yet. We are trying to get 1 or 2 players on who are going to be in the Grand Prix, but it's been a busy week with the Euro Tour and then the Pro Tour, so it's proven a bit difficult at the moment. So if we do get anyone, thanks very much for them for joining us. Thank you to everyone for listening. Do keep an eye out for our chat with the PDC Chief Exec, Matt Porter. That's going to be coming out sometime next week. But before then, all I've got to say is enjoy the World Grand Prix, and as always say, to put it more simply, just enjoy the darts.
Yeah, I was going to say and enjoy the team finals for the WDF, but by the time you're listening to this, that will already be long into the history books. But we'll try to figure out when we'll record. Maybe we'll try to get an episode in midweek. Obviously, we're hoping to speak to Matt Porter. Whether we'll just drop that interview or actually record an episode, that's TBD. But we'll let you know. Until then, I'm not even going to say the words I normally say, because by the time you're listening to this, it's double in, double out in Leicester for the World Grand Prix. It is just what Alex always says this week. Enjoy the darts.